Hey YouTube, what's going on? It's Brezzy43 coming at you again here with our next video. We're going to continue on with our series today, talking about competitive Pokemon. And yesterday we talked about natures and base stats for beginners. So if you wanted to take a look at that one, I'd recommend looking at that. I'll put the link to it down below. But today we're going to be beginning our conversation about EVs and IVs. And I think today we're going to talk mostly about IVs just because they're more straightforward than EVs. But IVs, but we'll get to EVs as well either tomorrow or later this week. But IVs today will be the focus of our conversation. So if you remember what we talked about yesterday with natures, a nature is essentially just a stat boost to whichever of your stats that you choose. We talked about how to alter them and where to go for those. So today we're going to talk about IVs. Now, IVs are slightly different than what you may be used to. When you think they're the hardest to obtain, but they're the easiest to understand once you actually know what they mean. So what are IVs? To start off, we are going to go into Pokemon Showdown, which is the application that we used yesterday, and we're going to take a look at it again here, and we're going to take a look at IVs. So let's go ahead and jump over. So we're going to go here. We're going to go play online, just like we did yesterday, and it should choose your name for you, or you just enter one in, and we'll go to the team builder feature, and we'll go back into our team that we started to look at some of the Pokemon we looked at yesterday. We're going to go back into the base stats. So IVs and EVs are both stat modifiers that you, as the player, have control over. IVs are stats, a stat value of between 0 and 31 given to each individual stat of a Pokemon. So you have 6 IVs, and these IVs are given to the Pokemon at birth or at encounter, exactly like a nature. And actually, interestingly enough, it was up until Generation 7, excuse me, the Sun and Moon games, that you were actually able to alter IVs after you got a Pokemon to level 100 via an in-game item called Bottle Cap. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So what are IVs exactly? They stand for individual value, whereas EV stands for effort value. Okay, so individual value, like I specified before, is a value between 0 and 31 assigned to a Pokemon, 1 per each of their stats at birth when they hatch or when you catch them. They are usually completely random. Occasionally you'll find one that might have a best stat, which is considered 31, but usually they're going to be anywhere in that spectrum of 0 to 31, with the exception of a legendary Pokemon. When you catch a legendary Pokemon, they are guaranteed to have 3 perfect IVs, which when people refer to a perfect IV, they refer to an IV of 31. 31 is the maximum that an IV can be. That's what a legendary Pokemon will always have 3 when you catch it. It can have more, but it will never have less. So, as you can well imagine, these are within the manipulation of the player. And for the vast majority of cases, you will be using 31 in all stats, just because it's going to be most applicable to you. If you were potentially looking for, if you didn't care too much about the special attack IV on Cinderace, because again, like we talked about yesterday, he's not a special attacker. You don't really care what this stat is. You're not going to be utilizing it. Then this number could essentially be whatever. But for the most part, for all the other stats, you are going to want to have a 31 value in all of them. So for Cinderace, it's going to be important to have a 31 HP, because if we start to go down a little bit, 30, okay, you still have the same value, but if you have a 29 stat, you actually lose an HP point. 28's the same, 27, you lose 1. This actually gets a little bit different once the Pokemon's level 100, because actually once the Pokemon's level 100, this will actually increase the stat by the number of IVs. So let me show you an example. If we go to level 100 Cinderace here, and we start dropping this, you will see the stat drop for every single IV that falls. So as you can see, it matters a lot more at level 100. At level 50, things scale a little bit differently. So it It's actually every 2 IVs boost the stat by 1. So as you can see, it's a difference of 31 points at level 100, but at level 50, for all intensive purposes, you could have a 31 or a 30, and that would be considered perfect for a level 50 Pokemon, because it only influences the stat by a maximum of 15, right? So for Cinderace, it's going to be important because you want him to. You are already not going to be investing any of your stats into its defenses, because, as we talked about, it's a physical attacker and it needs to be fast. So you want these defense values to be as high as they possibly can be. So if you were, for example, to have, let's say, a 24, you'd be losing 3 special defense points, which actually means that Cinderace might go down to something or faint to a special attacking move that it normally would not have, depending on the value. Usually this doesn't influence too many things from when it comes to a one-hit KO, but oftentimes it can be a margin of like, oh, you took too much damage from this move. Like maybe your opponent used a fairy move on your Cinderace that it normally would resist, and it dealt about 30% damage to you, and then you died to the Sandstorm chip from Sandstorm in play. Whereas before, if you had those extra 3 points, you may not have died to the Sand chip. So that's just an example. The vast majority of the cases, you are going to be looking at something like 31 like this. If you look at special attackers like Inteleon, Pokemon Showdown will automatically default your IVs to 0 for the physical attacking stat. The reason why is because there are 2 things that are calculated off of an attack stat that are not actual damage. There's a move called Foul Play that certain Pokemon use. It's a dark type move that actually calculates the damage off of the target's attack stat. So if somebody were to use Foul Play on my physical attacker, it would like on Cinderace, let's say, it would actually deal damage to Cinderace based on Cinderace's attack stat. Whereas for other Pokemon, and it doesn't matter what the user's attack stat is. So it could be off of a really, really weak dark type Pokemon that doesn't have any investment in their attack, and they can potentially get a knockout on Cinderace. So for Cinderace, obviously we can't change that. We have to have 31. But for Inteleon, we get benefits for being as low as possible, so we don't have to worry about Foul Play. The second thing is confusion. If you get confused and you hit yourself in confusion, the amount of damage that you take is directly dependent upon how high your physical attack stat is. So because we're not investing in attack, like I said, for Inteleon, it's going to be important to have this as low as possible. However, for your first time building a team or obtaining Pokemon, you don't have to worry about this. Just whatever you get for this value is fine, because like I said, we're not going to be investing into the attack stat of Inteleon. So if this is a 15, don't worry about it. It doesn't mean your Inteleon's bad. I have plenty of Pokemon that I consistently battle with on the ladder that are special attackers that don't have a 0 IV in attack. It's just kind of an optimization thing that comes into play later on down the line when we start talking about more advanced competitive spreads. So for the vast majority of Pokemon like Cinderace, you're going to have 31 in all your stats. Okay, so let's recap here real quick. IVs stand for individual values. A numerical number between 0 and 31 that modifies your stat by a maximum of 15 points at level 50 and 31 at level 100 that are obtained when the Pokemon is captured with a Pokeball, or when you breed it. Those are the ways that you can assign a Pokemon IVs. The other way that you can do it is, once your Pokemon's level 100, you can use a bottle cap to boost a single stat's IV up to a maximum, regardless of where it is. And you can use a gold bottle cap to boost all of your stats up to level 100. So we are going to take a look at my Switch here. I'm going to pull it up. Just give me one moment quick. We're going to get the Switch fired up. And we're going to start looking at in-game and how it looks and how you can measure IVs in-game. So once it loads for me here, I'm just going to have a drink of water. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over now. I'm going to turn and face my computer here, or my monitor here. So we are in the battle tower in Winden, and I'm going to go to the Pokemon, to my Pokemon. I'm going to go to my box, and I'm going to have a look here. This is all of my Pokemon that I have in my game. And if you take a look at this stat, or if you take a look at this, usually when you pull up the Pokedex, you'll see something like this, right? This is how you would actually check your IVs. So let's say I just captured this Galarian Slowpoke. This is the Galarian Slowpoke that you actually capture from the train station in Wedgehurst once you do the Isle of Armor. Okay, so you're going to be looking at the picture, and then here you get to see its stats with its nature. Like we talked about, this is a minus attack nature plus special defense nature. But there is a second tab here. The second tab, if we click open on it here, you'll get to see that all of the stats have a keyword written next to it that helps you denote what the actual IV is. So, as you can tell, it's helpful, but it's not super helpful because Slowpoke. Let me show you what a Pokemon would look like if it had perfect IV. So let's take a look at this Vikavolt. This Vikavolt here shows you its stats, and if you take a look at this page where the IVs are listed, the word best is given in the game when a Pokemon's IV stat is 31. It's the maximum that it can be. So my Vikavolt has a perfect HP, special defense, and speed stat. That means it's 31, no lower. It is automatically 31. The rest of these keywords can actually be are actually given as a range. So I'm going to pull up on my computer here. I'm going to take a look. Pokemon Sword. I'm just going to go to Google real quick. Let's take a look and see what it says here. Okay, so if the word given says no good, like my Snorlax's attack stat here, that means that the IV is 0. I knew that one. That one makes sense. So Snorlax has all perfect IVs except for attack. The word decent, like this Charmander's special attack stat, is referred to as an IV of a range of 1 to 10. You won't actually be able to check it in game as to what it actually is, but it's somewhere between 1 and 10. If it's a pretty good attack stat like this Cutiefly's special attack stat, or if it's a pretty good stat, it's going to be 11 to 20. Very good. I think I have something with very good. Yeah, so this Slowpoke speed stat's very good, which means it's between 21 and 29. If it has a fantastic stat, like... let me find one that has fantastic. I know I have one. I think it might be on a... Oh, I'll get to that in a second. I have one on a Coughing. There we go. So Coughing's attack stat is fantastic, which means that the IV is 30. It is a 30, so it's almost perfect. Which, like we talked about at level 50, a fantastic stat is going to be good enough, but it will not be at level 100. You'll be 1 point short of the maximum that you can be, and then best is 31. So if you look at some of these competitive Pokemon that I have in my boxes here, you'll see in the case of this Lapras, this Lapras is a special attacker, so it's not going to have... I don't care what the attack set is. So in this case, my attack IV is decent, which means it's a 1 through a 10. But the other stats are the important ones, and they are best. I would not normally have cared what the attack stat was on Lapras. As I said before, the most optimum physical attack stat that Lapras could have would be no good, because that means that I have a 0 IV, and that means that I'll take less damage from foul play and less damage from confusion. However, decent is just fine. It's 1 through 10. I'm not going to be too picky about it. My Salamence here is a physical attacker. It has a pretty good special attack stat because I don't really care what the special attack stat is because it's a physical attacker, but the rest of my stats are perfect. Okay, so you might be asking, okay, I get it, Prezi. I understand what IVs are now. I understand how to look at them. How do I get them on my Pokemon? Well, there's a couple different ways you can do this. The first one is the more tedious route. It's through breeding. I don't want to get too deep into breeding because breeding is very complicated, and in my opinion, it's too complicated for what it's worth. I think that the average Pokemon player who tries to breed is going to be completely discouraged by how long it takes. I breed a lot of my own Pokemon, and it takes a long time. It takes a very long time, especially if you're doing it optimally, which we'll talk about down the line. So, but just to touch on it briefly here, there are a couple of different ways you can breed Pokemon. Breeding gets a little more in depth when you're talking about breeding, like 2 different Gengar to get a Gengar. But Ditto is a fantastic Pokemon that can actually breed with any Pokemon. It's one of the few. It's the only Pokemon in the entire game that you can put into a daycare regardless of the gender, and pair it with a Pokemon regardless of gender, and make an egg. If you give one of your Pokemon, an held item called a Destiny Knot, I'll show you what it looks like. These are obtainable just on the ground, I think, or you can buy them for BP. This normally doesn't have any usage. An item to be held by a Pokemon, if the holder becomes infatuated, the opposing Pokemon will be too. But Destiny Knot is very unique because if you give it to one of the 2 parent Pokemons that you are putting into the daycare, you are guaranteed to pass on a random 5 IVs to your offspring Pokemon between both parents. So it can help you sort of like, as you, let's say I had a Ditto with 3 perfect IVs, and I had a Hitmontop that didn't have any. I could put Hitmontop in the daycare with my Ditto holding the Destiny Knot, and I could keep hatching baby Tyrogue until I get a Tyrogue with with 1 or more perfect IVs. Then I can go back in, take Hitmontop out, swap it for the Tyrogue, and repeat the process and continue going until I eventually get my Pokemon with enough IVs to be where I want it to be and optimized how I want it to be optimized. This takes a long time. This also requires that you have a Ditto with perfect IVs, which the vast majority of players do not. So that's one way you can do it. You can go. There's an island. I'll show you a picture of it on the map. If you have the DLC, there is an island on the Isle of Armor. I believe it's. I don't think it's Honeycomb. I think it might be. It might be like this one, or one of these other ones in the Stepping Stone Sea. That's referred to as Ditto Island. You can find Dittos there. It might be this. It might be this one. I don't know for sure. But it's somewhere on the Isle of Armor. There's an island that is completely full of Dittos, and you can also battle max raid Dittos to increase your chances of having perfect IVs. That's one way you can do it if you are insistent upon breeding your Pokemon. Another way you can do it is through the use of bottle caps, like we talked about. So, if you have bottle caps and you have a level 100 Pokemon, you are going to go to Winden, which is where I am right now. You're going to go to the Battle Tower. The Battle Tower is here. If you fly here, it's the furthest most point of the base map, right up here. You're going to fly here. It's actually labeled on the Battle Tower. It says Hyper Training. This is referred to as Hyper Training. So you're going to go in, and you're going to go talk to this NPC over here. And he says, now, which Pokemon will I have undergo Hyper Training? So it has to be level 100 like I talked about. So if you look at, I've got a handful of level 100 Pokemon in here. These ones, I believe I already boosted their stats. Yeah, so normally I would click right here. I'll just show you what it looks like. Click on Weavile, select Weavile. And it says, would you like to use a bottle cap or a gold bottle cap? Remember, gold bottle caps are harder to come by, but they will boost all of my IVs up to 31 for me. A single bottle cap will just boost one of my 6 stats up to 31. So let's say I were to go for a bottle cap, which stat should I hype up? It would look like this if there was more than just the special attack stat that I could hype up. But in this case, all my other stats are perfect except my special attack. So I would check this box and I'd say, let's start the hyper training. I'm not going to do that because I don't need to. But once it's done, it'll look like this. So in this case, I caught the Heatran from the... I actually think I caught this in a previous game because it's got the battle symbol. I think I caught it in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. And I went in and I haven't changed the nature yet, but I hyper trained all the stats because Heatran is a special attacker, so I had to go through and do the hyper training. Thundurus I caught from this game in the Crown Tundra DLC, and it had 4 perfect IVs in this case, like we talked about. It'll have 3 or more guaranteed, so I only had to hyper train 2 stats. Regieleki I caught and I hypertrain 2 of its stats because I don't care about its physical attack stat, since it is in fact usually runs special. Nihilego is another one. I caught this one from a previous game, it looks like. I had to go through I had to get the battle stamp on it, but I had to hypertrain the special attack stat and the speed stat, because the 3 perfect IVs I caught were HP and defense and special defense. This is probably going to be the best way to get your Pokemon's IVs to 31. And you can actually buy bottle caps from this gentleman right here for 25 battle points, which is not too bad. So you buy, in theory, you're looking at about 100 battle points, 125 per Pokemon, assuming that they didn't have any perfect IVs. This is really nice. This is a really nice feature. This came around in Sun and Moon because it was difficult to get IVs in that game. It's always been difficult to get IVs without hacked Dittos, or without like cheating the game to get a Ditto with perfect IVs. Or having a friend that has a cheated Ditto that they can share with you, so you can do that. Like, either way, it's still just like takes forever to do the breeding process. And this is kind of a side tangent, but in my personal opinion, I feel like there's plenty of ways that they should optimize that, because breeding's kind of an outdated thing. Like, competitive Pokemon is so much more dynamic now, and you get a lot more out of practicing, and there's a lot of talk about people using professional players using hacked Pokemon anyway, so what does it matter? That's a whole different story. But I think personally that breeding is a little bit too tedious, but these quality of life features like bottle caps have made things a lot better. It also allows you to play the game through with a team, and then boost their IVs at the end of the game, and make your Pokemon that you've played through the game with competitive, which is really cool. I really like that feature a lot. So, to recap real quick, IVs, individual values assigned to all 6 of the Pokemon's stats at birth, or at encounter, anywhere from 0 to 31, that actually boost the stat a maximum of 15 points at level 50 and 31 points at level 100. For the vast majority of your Pokemon, it's going to be best to just have all of the relevant stats be 31. In my later videos, as we continue on this series, we'll talk about some potential optimizations to be made for Pokemon where maybe you don't want to have a 31 stat, for reasons other than what we talked about with confusion and foul play. But that more to come on that later. I just want to keep things simple right now for all the beginners out there and my friends that are going to be watching this that want to understand a little bit more about this. So that's IV. That's what they are. You can obtain them either through breeding or through the use of bottle caps. Bottle caps being slightly more efficient and time friendly for the average person. But if you've got the time to breed, it'll save you the in-game money through not having to buy bottle caps and whatnot. So that is IVs. I think that's all that I want to say about IVs. I don't think there's much more that I can add. This is a fantastic way to check this. Oh, I do want to say one more thing. So I'm going to, let's do an example here. How do you check let's say I wanted to check and see what my actual IV value is. Because, decent on Necrozma doesn't help me at all. An example of this for me is Stakataka. I did a bunch of resets for Stakataka, and I actually ended up finding one that had a decent speed stat for IV, with a speed reducing nature. So how did I find out what the actual stat was? How did I know it was low enough for me to use? Because Stakataka is an example of a Pokemon that's going to want to have as low as possible of a speed stat. Or let's say a better example might be, wow, that was a really lucky Kyogre that I caught. Holy cow. What's a good example here? Maybe let's say you didn't want to boost your Pokemon all the way to level 100 and you wanted to see how good the stats were. I don't have anything that's really close. That's a really good Lunala, actually. No good attack stats, quite nice, because it's a special attacker. I think this is a good example. Yeah, Zekrom is a good example. Well, this is not actually a good example because it's based. We know fantastic means 30. Let's go back to our Stakataka example. So Stakataka, as you can see, has 4 perfect IVs and 2 non-perfect IVs, 2 decent IVs. Let's say I wanted to find out what exactly these IVs were for a numerical value. I did this with some other Pokemon in the past. So let's go ahead and say we're going to go to this screen here, and I'm going to actually switch back to Pokemon Showdown for you. So this is the screen I'm going to be looking at. Go to Showdown, and I'm going to type in Stakataka. I'm just going to move my mic over to the side here. Stakataka. Okay. Now it's important that I change the level to the Stakataka that I have, to the level of the Stakataka in my game. So in this case, I have a level 70 Stakataka that I caught. So I'll change this to level 70. And then I'm going to want to input the nature. If you don't know the name of it, that's okay. You can just refer to the lettering like we talked about yesterday. So in this case, I have the word speed is blue, which means it's minus, and the word attack is red, which means it is plus. Okay, so now we're going to look and say, okay, well, we know that attack, defense, special attack, and special defense are going to be best. So if we take a look, I'm going to show you 231, 322, 100, 168. Pull up OBS here. I'm going to switch back over to Pokemon, and you're going to see attack stat 231, defense stat 322, special attack stat 100, special defense stat 168. Okay, so that's a great way to confirm that these match, right? So Showdown is doing things right, and this is a way for you to check the stats. So we're going to try to figure out what the HP and the speed IVs are. We know that they're somewhere between 1 and 10, but we don't know exactly what they are yet. So I'm going to go back to Showdown, minimize my OBS, and go back into the stats. So my Stakataka in my game has a 23 stat after the nature reduction. So I have a 39 stat according to a perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and just start dropping this, and we're going to see what happens. Drop, 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 drop. So now you can see we're getting close. So in this case, I have either a 4 or a 5 IV for speed Stakataka. That can be important information for me to know because it will help me in reference to other Stakatakas. And Stakataka is an example of a really slow Pokemon that you want to have be as slow as possible, but it can really be really hard to obtain a 0 IV Stakataka because it's a legendary Pokemon, and like I said before, 3 of the stats are guaranteed to be perfect, so it can be kind of tricky. But in this case, 4 or 5 is pretty good. I don't have to worry too much about it, but the HP stat is 168, so if we were to decrease this one, my game says 168, we're going to go down, 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 down. Looks like we're looking at about a 4 or 5 for my HP stat as well. So we'll likely have to bottle cap that. But let's say for some reason you wanted to check and leave it the way it was. This would be a way for you to check and figure out what exactly your IVs are on your Pokemon that are not perfect IVs. Okay. I think we've touched on everything. That's a lot of information. I don't want to go over too much more because it can be overwhelming. Just remember, IVs, individual values, stat boosters for your Pokemon. They are great ways to have the most optimum stats for your Pokemon are going to be 31 for the vast majority of Pokemon. Down the line, like I said, we'll talk more about it and talk more about optimizations for potentially stats that you may want on certain Pokemon to not be 31. So I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope it's not too much information. If you have any further questions about it, leave it in the comment section. I can touch on it on my next video and maybe elaborate more or clarify some things that maybe were a little bit confusing. But for now, that's what IVs are. They can be obtained through breeding or bottle capping. And yeah, I hope this was helpful. I know IVs tend to confuse a lot of the people that I'm personally friends with that I try to teach Pokemon to. It confuses them a little bit. They're like, wait, you have to breed for perfect stats? Like, what do you mean? And it's been made a lot easier with Sun and Moon and with bottle caps being ported over to Sword and Shield as well. It's a fantastic way to get your IVs up to where you want them without having to do a whole bunch of endless hours of breeding. So yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any feedback for me at all, please leave it in the comment section. I do want to read all the comments and make the best possible content I can for everyone. So I'd love to hear what I'm doing correctly, maybe what I'm doing incorrectly, things I can do to optimize. Yeah, just let me know your thoughts, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care.